So today we talk about these mapping services, map services, and also a little bit about routing services, but the main focus is going to be on map. And I have very few slides. I have just this, more or less, this table, that I have to say it may be wrong. I tried to update it yesterday, but these things are changing all the time, like what some map system supports, what it doesn't support. They are constantly developing, and I haven't checked, for example, how is MapQuest recently, or how is Bing Maps recently. But I keep an eye on Google Maps and on Mapbox. OSRM is not a map service, but it uses the map road network. It is the one that we can use for routing from point A to point B. I added it here just because I want you to know that routing is something that usually map APIs support, but you can do it also without relying on a map at all. So your application can do, for example, voice navigation routing, or just give you directions on which streets to turn, and that can be without any map at all, and you can use, for example, OSRM and install it on your own server even. I have to say that it's possible to do that by calling the routing service from Google Maps, for example, as well. So you can ask just for directions even though you wouldn't use a map at all. But anyway, so what I want to point out here is that there are a bunch of functionalities that are usually supported by all map service providers. So for example, if you are going to look for a JavaScript API, or if you want it to be mobile friendly on Android or iPhone, there is Android API, iPhone API, and JavaScript API for almost all of these things, for all the map options. And also typical functions like geocoding or reverse geocoding. So geocoding means that you find address for coordinates and reverse coordinates for address, or vice versa. I don't remember actually exactly which one is which, but important functionality. So you want to know what is the street you are on somehow. Routing and traffic information is also available nowadays. And in your projects, you can actually choose which one you want from here. All of them need you to make some kind of account and to get some kind of key, API key to work with when you are developing. You could try to use the key that I am using for the Google Maps account, but like I told last time when we talked about this, it's limited to a certain number of calls, and if you call it too much, it may stop working. I may also end up paying, but I think that shouldn't happen because I imposed a limit on the account, so it should stop working before that would happen. So what are these features and what are these services looking like? And focusing a little bit on this bottom part here, I'm going to just start to explain a little bit with demos. So Google Maps, if I'm going to search for Google Maps API, the first link that pops up is something like this. And this is where we can see what I have mentioned before, like you have the JavaScript API here, Android development kit also there, the one for iOS is there, and even separate they offer these services for getting directions, for getting distance matrix. So distance matrix doesn't mean just directions from A to B. It means that you have a set of, let's say, 10 items, and you're going to get the distances in a matrix from the first one to the second one to the third one to the fourth one, all possible distances in one request. Roads API, I don't remember exactly how it goes. Places, this is more or less a big database of locations that are services or something like that. So for example, restaurants or bars or things where you can do something, you can query using this API. There are many useful things that Google can offer, but today we are going to work with this JavaScript API. So I'm going to open it in a separate tab there. Now I have to say that these other things offer very, very similar things. Like for example, I will try to open MapQuest, even though I haven't opened it for a very long time. I don't know if it has changed somewhat since then, but okay. So MapQuest looks like this. If I would compare it to Google Maps, it has quite similar things, like I guess I could search for some location, let's say Kuopio. It worked. It didn't work. But it's interesting to know that there is a Kuopio coffee house somewhere in, is this Canada or? Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, one of them is there. So reliability of the information seems to, I mean, the information is correct. The city is identified, even though it's identified somewhere there. Food options. So I get food options in some parts, some McDonald's somewhere in Europe, but most of the services seems to be in US, and it takes some time to load. So these kind of things are, how to say, okay, groceries. The services are offered by all these map providers, but some of them may have less accurate or just less data in general. Hotels. Okay, hotels actually seems to work also here. Well, at least nearby, but okay, they are somehow disappearing from the map. So the reason why I have Google Maps here and why I'm choosing it to demonstrate things is that if I try some other alternative, other bugs, other things tend to come up. It doesn't work as I expect, so from the service quality point of view, it has the most power. It has these special features as well, like if you go on Google Maps, you probably know this kind of more fancy things like the Street View. So very much money and effort has went into doing this kind of feature. It has good things, it has bad things. Bad things typically coming from privacy concerns, people that are in the pictures and don't want to be in the pictures, or maybe old pictures. This picture was taken in 2009. Does Kuopio still look like that today? It can be confusing if, for example, this building is not there anymore and you're trying to use it to navigate. Any good thing has also bad things, even though when they are advertised you don't necessarily hear about them. Then in the satellite mode, Google tends to have also this 3D mode nowadays. It's quite impressive. There are some kind of interesting geometry tricks to get it to work. So if we go back to here, that's what the 3D means, that's what the street view means. It doesn't have this bird's eye view, which is something that Bing Maps has. So instead of having this I don't really remember how to turn it on, but view bird's eye. Okay, right click and view bird's eye. It has this, so this is more or less okay, a bit confusing. I'm not sure what is happening, if there is a bug or not, but okay, sometimes some strange things are happening, like orientation changes. Anyway, they try to offer a different perspective, so they don't go all the way to street level, but they go through airplane pictures, and these are almost as good, like they are going very high quality, very close. You can see that there is some construction work happening, or you can see if somebody's car is at his parking place, something that is just not good enough accuracy from the satellite view. So different features provided by different things. And I have to say, 2 years ago I had this video clip here that Google Maps was promising some gaming API as well. And until recently, this kind of stuff was not available. So even though they were saying it will come soon, and it was saying things like we have contracts with the Harry Potter series, or with I don't remember, that the new games are coming and they will use this kind of sophisticated API for redesigning the real world. Until recently I haven't really seen this in practice, and it wasn't documented anywhere. But now if you will Google for Google Maps gaming API, you can find something about it, and I am not sure how to use it. I haven't really tried to use it, but it seems to allow very interesting configurations to happen, and even seems to support Unity nowadays. So Unity is this platform for game development that Mapbox also supports. Just a small update here. So these things are changing all the time, and I had this slide prepared 2 years ago, and I haven't seen any official page back then. So this was meant as a future feature to come soon, but it didn't. And since then we got now this Niantic Harry Potter game, and it doesn't use Google Maps. So this has been too late for adapting. But maybe some things will start soon. So you can check it out. Maybe it's possible to use already now. It seems to be advertised on their main page. Yeah, so I'm going to focus on Google Maps, not because I think that you need it. I just think that it has the most complete features. So if you have some kind of idea, it has reliable data, most reliable data, even though bugs exist. So you will find, for example, street view pictures where the buildings are not there anymore, or you will find roads that are not there anymore because, I don't know, road has changed and Google just hasn't figured out yet that it has changed. but out of all of them, it's somehow the most reliable source of data and the most feature-rich. So you can use many things. Of course, if you're going to build commercial applications, then you will have to start to pay real money for using it in your systems. This applies to all of them. Like even if you will use MapQuest or so MapQuest also has API that you can use in your application. The same type of services offered by them: mapping, geocoding, direction, even traffic, whatever. Of course, if they don't have hotels in the region, then your application is not going to be working everywhere. So this is an issue: data reliability, data recency. It does have, anyway, JavaScript API, Android, iOS. More recently, this Mapbox had started to become very popular among students. So last year, students were developing in this Mapbox very much. They have very interesting things that allow you to make, for example, this type of 3D environment or some augmented reality tricks. This is something that augmented reality guys from Joensuu can check if they find it useful, even though they may have already some other ideas there. Very impressive features coming from this Mapbox. I would have wanted to teach this year using it. I just didn't have time to learn it, to study the documentation. But of course, you can do it. So I believe that you can. And it has also this Unity support. So if you are a game developer and you want to make a game, then you can use the Mapbox API in Unity as well. So Unity is this game development platform. Okay. Any questions about map services, or have you tried using something, or have you had difficulties using something, or payment and pricing and billing? They usually offer free trials. So they usually offer free trials that are usually endless. I mean, in the sense that if you don't have a commercial application, as a developer, you can use it for free up to some number of requests. After that requests, what usually happens is that it stops working, or like in Google's case more recently, it actually starts to bill you. It does have their settings that you can put on, like for example, if it reaches a certain number of requests, stop working. So you can limit it, but it just becomes easier to have people pay. I don't like it specifically, especially, I mean, it's getting even less useful that I know how to use it, but because I don't have a plan to go commercial just yet. But anyway, they can allow themselves to do this because the services that they offer are quite good. So people still choose it, even though it's getting more and more towards paying for it. Okay, so depending on your application, these other ones tend to be a bit more flexible. They allow you to call more requests, or maybe they allow you to have some kind of I don't know anymore, but there used to be like agreements that if you have a commercial application, but if you still have few requests, then you can still use it. These things are changing all the time. So all the all their constraints and all their pricing and their options. So I'm not here to tell you that this is still the case now, but that you should look into it. And when you're making an app, this is the first decision that you have to check. What will your app do? Does it even need a map? And if it does, for what purpose? Are the features available in the platform that you are using? Look also at pricing and things like that. So my message for you is this data may be outdated. It's very hard to keep it up to date, but they differ. So keep it in mind. Okay. So what we are going to do today is actually program a little bit with the Google Map. And I have a plan to do something a bit similar to what I did some years ago, but significantly different. So let's see what will come out of it. I'm going to start with a basic map. So this is a simple Google Map application. It just loads the Google Map and it focuses it on Joensuu. So a little bit biased towards the other side since I'm today in Kuopio. But maybe we will fix this issue somehow. So how does this code work? It's a HTML page. Title is just Google Maps. There is some styling here that makes the map full screen. So body usually has a small margin and a padding there, so I force it to 0 and I put it to have the maximum height. Then in the below part here, I actually have to initialize the Google Map, so it's external JavaScript here, initialized with the key. So this key that I have here, I got it from the Google account that I made there. It gave me a key that I can use to identify my application. So if you're going to use a Google Map, you will need to also make the account and get such a key. You need to get this key for any kind of mapping service that you use. If you're going to use a Bing map instead, or not Overpass, this Mapbox, all of them work on this key basis. And after the map initializes, it calls this init map function, which centers the map over Joensuu at a given zoom level. So already you see some concept related to the maps. They have different zoom levels. So if I'm going to put a different value here, say 8, save the file and refresh the page, it's still going to center on Joensuu, but now I'm zoomed out a bit more. I can actually see Kuopio as well. Okay. So how did I learn to do this? I more or less did Google Maps JavaScript API. And in this page, probably from here is where you get the keys and so on. This page is also very different. I just noticed today. This is also a button for these keys, so look for these things when starting to develop. But then what we have on all of these pages, so no matter if you're going to go on Mapbox or OpenLayers or Bing, they all have very many examples of how to do things. So for instance, a simple map. The source code for building a simple map is here. Looks very similar to what I have done there. I actually copied it. I have even the comments there, like making it full screen and whatever. My coordinates are a little different because I used Joensuu. And notice here the API key that you have to paste there. So it's attracting the attention that you have to do that. These samples are really good at learning to develop anything using the maps. If you scroll down here, you will see very many different things. For example, styled maps. So I could get the map to look like this. How to do that? Well, it's not easy. You have to define how the water should look like, how the transit station should look like. Basically, how different things, you need to specify a new style for that. There are also styled map types here. These samples contain very much useful things like what we talked before about making your application look different if it's sunny outside. Well, you could more or less copy this style from here and you wouldn't have to worry about reading the full documentation of what all the things that you have to change to make it look different. So it's a little bit speed up to use these samples instead. Simple markers. You all seem to have these markers in the applications somehow. How to add a marker like this, I'm more or less going to copy this code here. I'm going to put it exactly where I defined Joensuu to be here. And my map variable is a global variable, but it could be accessed even just here. It says some hello world there. Let's just leave it on. So I'm going to refresh the page. And now the marker is there, with hello world appearing when my mouse is hovering it. So interesting to see this effect. I didn't know, I just copied it, but I figured out this effect. Now, you can't really copy everything from these samples, because then you're just going to make what other people have been doing. You're just going to copy an example from there. What you really should master if you are going to become a pro developer is the reference. So this reference means from the maps, like if I'm going to open the map reference here, I'm going to have a list of all the methods that I can use the map for. So this is now more or less like a dictionary, like a list of things that you can do with it. You can fit bounds. That means that if you have some region that you want to show, you can give it that region and it will move to specifically show the given region. Get bounds just means find out what are the coordinates of the top left corner, bottom right corner here. So the bounding region. The center is something that we can figure out. So what is the center of this? I can open my console and I can say map.getCenter. What is that? If you go back to the documentation, you will see that the center returns a lat-lng object. Okay, so getCenter returns an object that looks like this. I can click on it and I can figure out what this object has. So this lat-lng object keeps the latitude and the longitude of the object, or the longitude of the object, and it has some attributes here, some functions, some methods that I can call. For example, to get the latitude, so now I can get the LAT. But this is not the latitude of the marker, this is the latitude of the center of the map. So if I moved the map a little bit, then now I get a different one, because it's now here where the Utra island is. So this is Utra Island in Joensuu there, and it has a latitude of that and a longitude of that. So how did I figure out the location of Utra? Is more or less combining the map panning and reading the reference to figure out how to access these values. So this is what good programmers actually master. They look at the samples, and then when it's not enough, they need to learn how to look at the reference and modify the sample towards their exact need. And bad programmers stop at the samples and that's it. So they do something close enough and then hope it's good. Okay, but how to do more things? So let's try to look now at the reference again and work with this marker a little bit more. So I'm going to go here at the marker class, and I can see that there is a possibility to give options to the marker. It's a possibility to set it as a draggable object. It's a possibility to listen to events for the object. So for example, when your object is dragged, you can trigger something to happen on top of that. So all of this documentation, you don't have to know all of it, but depending on what you kind of want your application to do, you should be able to filter out what is necessary and what is not necessary. So if you want to make your application, your marker draggable, now it's not. If I try to drag it, I just pan the map instead. But if I want to have it draggable, I just have to figure out that there is here a draggable property with a Boolean, expecting a Boolean type. So now it moves. Now it moves wherever I want to put it down. But of course, if I want to detect this change in the movement, I would have to listen to the drag event listeners and so on. I'm not going to go into that level. But typically what I see from people making applications is that they figure out how to do the marker, they put it there, but then it continues to look like that. It continues to look like that even though their application should show their location or something else. This is the default style of the marker, and you don't want to use this style for everything, for services, for your location, for your friend's location, because you will confuse the user very much. So you need to have a way of setting different styles to this marker. And you could go actually to the samples, because I know that there is here in the wow. Okay, just a second, my computer is going crazy. In the drawing on the map, you can have, for example, complex marker icons. So if you know that you are looking for marker related things, good idea to go first to the samples, because maybe there is example code using many things from the references that just you can have a shortcut than reading the entire reference. So here they are using this flag instead, which I assume that the flag is going to be some kind of image somewhere. So for example, I see here an image having a URL, having a size, origin, anchor, wow, many complicated things there. And then this image is given as an icon to the marker object. So this is something you can learn from references as well, but maybe we use this type of trick here. So I'm going to try to copy this. And see if it works, because if it works, then I just have to modify this and I can skip reading very many references text. So it was icon image. I'm gonna save the file, refresh the page, and it actually works. Yes. But I don't want to do this flag thing, so I want to create my own icon for something, right? I have here PowerPoint open, so I'm gonna try to make some icon. I don't want to reuse other people's icons this time. And I'm gonna draw something, so I'm just gonna put something here. My artistic skills maybe they need a little bit polishing. So this is more or less supposed to look like Superman. With Elvis haircut. Well, I've done better. Okay. I'm happy enough with that. I can do better, but not today. Okay. Yeah, so we have that. Okay, face should not be blue. At least I should give him that. Right. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna save this as an icon, as a PNG. PowerPoint is nice enough that I can save it as PNG, so that means that this background is going to stay transparent when I have my marker there. It won't have this white background that in a square that you could see the bounding box. If I would save it as a JPEG, then it would have the white background. So JPEG does not support this transparency. I have to now log in, unfortunately I forgot, to CS server, where this demo is going to be held. And I'm gonna put here directory images, and in the directory I'm going to put the newly made picture, and in the code I'm going to say here the URL is going to be images and the file name. Okay, great. I go back here, refresh the page, and nothing happens. And I don't know why. Maybe I need to have it as a reference, a relative path here. Let's try. No. Is my path even correct? So demos, images. It should be here, images. Yeah, okay, but it doesn't work. So what could be the issue? I could try to put the full path. If somebody has an idea. Nope. It could be that this picture that I drew is too big. I don't think this is a problem. Wow, interesting. Okay, something is happening there. So the problem is actually, yeah, the size, but my code here that I copied from there is doing some extra things here that I just didn't read enough because I was too much in a hurry. So this is the part when, again, good programmer has to look at the documentation. So it seems like what the code is doing, it's expecting the image to be 20 pixels wide by 32 pixels high, tall, and it's actually cropping it. So it's cropping it to that size, and before, when I had the drawing, that part of the image was this empty thing here. So this is where programmers can spend maybe a half an hour, maybe a whole day. It doesn't work. It should work. It worked with the flag, but not with my picture. So these kind of debugging skills, or just going back to the reference and reading what all of these values are, is your job when you make the application look the way you want it to. Okay, so I have something here now, but very, very strange. So I would need to go back to the reference and really read what is there. So I need to go read the marker reference, and then from the marker I need to look at the marker options. And in the marker options, I have the icon value that I'm now setting as the PNG, but I also have here other things like the size that I am using, origin and anchor. All these things I have been using there, but only because of the copy-paste trick that I did before. So one thing that could actually help me, I think, if I remember right, is to set this scaled size attribute. So if I would set this scaled size to the same value that I'm setting the size, I think that some stretching will occur. I'm not sure. Again, this is something that I should read the documentation fully. But now actually it does do what I'm expecting it to do. It displays all of it, but the aspect ratio is now a mess. It's not a vertical aspect ratio. It should have a horizontal aspect ratio. So I should know the exact pixel size of my drawing here. What I do know now is that it's more or less horizontal in this way. So this all of that thing that I'm doing now is more or less fine-tuning just to get the interface that I want. And the anchor point, this is very problematic now. So anchor point means that that X that you see under the marker shows the location of this marker. In the flag drawing that was previously made, that I copied from the sample, that flag looked like this. So it made sense for that flag to have the anchor point at 0, 0, because that's where the flag was anchored at. But in my case, okay, 0, 32, because 0, 0 is here in this corner. So 0, 32, it moved down to this location. But now I would like to have it in the middle of the guy, maybe. I mean, that would be more intuitive to this type of object. So then I would look at this value. I would say 40 divided by 2 and say that this should be 20, and the other is 20 divided by 2, which is 10. So if I refresh now this page, I can see that the X is actually hidden behind the character. This may seem like nothing, but it does have very much impact. For example, I'm sorry? Did anybody say something?
No.
Okay, if you put it over the university here and you zoom out, it stays over Joensuu, and it looks quite nice when I aligned the anchor point. But if my anchor point is wrong, like if I put it to 0, 0, and I do exactly the same thing, and now I zoom out, I can see that my character is actually leaving Joensuu. Depending on your type of application, it even left Finland now. Depending on your application, this can give very unintuitive results. Think about it. You look at hotels and you want a hotel in Finland. You're looking at the whole globe because whatever map initialization, and you're like, there's nothing there. I have something in Russia here, but I don't need to click on something there. So it's very bad. Depending on the application. So this needs to be very, very carefully handled. And I expect you to do the same depending on your type of application that you make. Okay. Now, okay, this character is nice there, but I put him there because I want him to fly. So let's keep it as a global variable. So here I just initialize him in Joensuu, but after that I want him to update his location. So I want him to update his location at an interval. And I update it every 100 milliseconds, let's say. So what I want to do in this function is make him move towards east a little bit. So it will repeat this movement. So marker, I think it's set position. I'm not sure. I could check the reference, but maybe I just remember it. So set position. Okay, let's look at the reference. I want to speed up a little bit. Okay, set position. It does work with this lat lng object, and I can call it to the marker. But before that, I need to know where it is. So marker get position gives me the current location of the marker. Okay, and now if I want this location to change, I need to go to see the lat lng object, and does it have any method for setting? Okay, it has the lng property, so let's try that. So I give it some small degree in the longitude. That means it should move towards east. So I'm setting its position after I have modified it. Let's see if it works. LNG is not a function. Oh my. So these are difficulties when it jumps into the code of the API itself. So much of this code that we have included when we said here that I want to use the Google Map API it is accessible, but it's very hard to debug it. So it's hard to debug in the sense that it's usually minimized, or how is it called, minified, like that. You could try to do this pretty printing, but it's usually quite difficult. So when it's not doing something that you expect, your only hope is to go back, read the reference, and see if you are doing something wrong. I don't really know a better way to debug these things. There could be. I'm not a pro developer of these things, but I just don't know it well enough. So going back to the reference and seeing what the issue may be. Instead of doing that, I'm actually gonna fix the issue the way I know how to fix the issue. So the updated latitude, longitude, I will initialize it through the constructor. So I'm going to say new Google Maps LAT-LNG of the latitude value, but the longitude value adding to, yeah, that. And I hope this works. If not, I really have to go to look at the reference. So I'm defining a new object that has the same latitude but a different longitude. Save the file, refresh the page. Yeah, very fast. Don't laugh, this is really fast. It's really fast, but kind of standing still, isn't it? So zoom level affects everything quite much. Every time you double the zoom level, you double everything or decrease everything, like perceived speed. If I'm going to go quite close to it, it's going to look quite impressive. Yeah, very, very interesting. Anyway, so this is one thing that we can show here. Of course, it could be nice to actually make him move much faster. It is much faster, but again, it doesn't look that fast on a world scale. I want to somehow simulate the movie scene where he is circling the Earth very quickly and making time go backwards or whatever. So in that one, I think I need to use here something much more significant as a value. Okay, something is... Okay, so at least there is something, but in that scene he was leaving this kind of trail. So I'm now talking about the very old, well, I don't know how old it is, but the first Superman movie that people know about. So let's try to draw this trail behind him. To draw the trail, you need to use the polyline object from the reference here. So polyline, the polyline object allows me to draw lines on the map, and very likely I can find some sample that uses it. Simple polylines. it's a line. So now I'm hoping that I can actually copy something here and reuse. Okay. I'm going to keep this polyline also as a, I'm going to call it flight path. It's actually even called flight path. It was meant for airplanes, but in this case it's a good naming name for our variable. So I'm going to keep it also as a global. And what I'm going to do now is actually add it to the map. And I could do it with this function, setMap map. Or I could do it the same way that I did before for the marker and just specify the map as one of the arguments. Both of them actually do the same thing. So if I call this or if I add it there, it's going to have the same result. But the path, I'm going to keep it to empty in the beginning. So in the beginning there is no path, but I'm going to modify the path as the marker is moving always to the new location. So let's keep this path as, let's see what it's expecting to have. Just array of latitude and longitude objects. So object with latitude and object with longitude. It's very interesting because we worked before with the LAT LNG object, but here it's not using an LAT LNG object. It's using this object that contains the two attributes instead. I'm not sure if it works with the other one, but I will use this specific thing right now. So my polyline path is equal to an empty array, but every time a new location is coming, my polyline path gets a new object at that location. So at the specific LNG and the specific LAT. Okay, and my flight path needs to update to this new polyline path, so similar to what we have here. Now, how to set the path? I believe that I have to look at the reference. It's not there, it's already initialized, but here I need to know how to update it. So the polyline class should have a way to get the path. And this is probably what I have to do. So I have to update to set the new path every time it changes. So set path, polyline path. This should do what I'm expecting it to do, I hope. Many errors. I mean, 3 errors, but nothing happens, so quite serious errors. So missing something after something. This is in my code, so I can debug here really nicely using this console, but I think that I can spot the issue. I'm forgetting here to close this bracket, so note that here I have this object that contains the LAT LNG, and I was forgetting to close the push methods bracket there. Refresh the page. something interesting is happening. So there is a line coming, but you noticed it was bouncing. I mean, it's bouncing a little. It's not really a straight line. It has some kind of curvature here. So this curvature comes from this geodesic property of the polyline. This is something you may want to have, or maybe you don't want to have in your application. In this case, it kind of looks funny, so I'm going to take it out. I'm also going to make the color for the path black, and I'm going to make its opacity 0.2 because it's supposed to be this kind of blur effect, so I don't want to make it look like some ink stripe. Refresh the page. Okay, now it's time to set the zoom also to maybe 4, because I don't like refreshing all the time and zooming out. So now the line is a straight line, it doesn't have that bouncing effect. But in the movie, he wasn't really going exactly in the same path all the time. He was a little bit having an offset. So I'm going to simulate that offset by adding a random noise to the latitude component as well. I'm going to say here plus a random value between 0 and 1. Maybe too much. Let's multiply this by 0.1. So I'm scaling it. Very good idea to define what the values mean. Don't have the code be just this kind of cryptic numbers everywhere, because then you don't remember what they mean a week from now. Okay, so let's see now what happens. Okay, yeah, it's not what I intended. I intended him to slightly have the offset, and unfortunately this math random is between 0 and 1, so it's always going to go higher and higher. So if I wanted to sometimes go lower as well, I need to subtract minus 0.5 from it. And I think it should be dot here. So minus 0.5 is going to give me now values between minus 0.5 and plus 0.5. So refreshing the page, a little bit more like what I'm looking for, so leaving this kind of trail behind. So this is more or less to demonstrate a little bit about how to use such an API. You can do this thing in all the other map services as well. We can go much more deep. We could use, for example, from the last time, I presented these ways to get the weather information. So the weather information we could obtain from Open Weather Map. I'm going to quickly copy this. So I gave you the code to look at. If you have looked, then you should be familiar with these things. So I'm going to say get the weather okay, in a city. Okay, sure, why not? So I have here a function that gets the weather in a specific city. Also many output things that I don't need here. Oh, and get request handler that I haven't defined now. I copied that also. So I'm going to do an HTTP request, a GET request, an asynchronous request that when it completes, it calls onGetWeather. It will get the weather in a city using the API key that I have found, I have used from, I have requested from OpenWeatherMap. So I get the weather in a city, and when it completes, I just parse it, I just output it in the console. So console object. So I have here onGetWeather, okay, but I have to call it somewhere, so I'm going to call it here, getWeather in city. I'm just going to put Joensuu there and see if it works. I can also access the API, ask it to give me the weather at some coordinates. So this OpenWeatherMap, if you go there and check the API, current weather data, API documentation. So here you can see by city ID, by geographic coordinates, by zip code. So you can check the documentation. There are many ways of it to be called. But now I refresh the page and I'm getting some information about the weather here in my console. And I actually get it twice for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why, but anyway. So if I access the weather, I can see that I have here the wind property. And I could make Superman move a little bit by the wind. I mean, influenced by the wind. So I could have him speed up if the wind is blowing from the back, or slow down if the wind is coming from the front. So this is just a silly idea of how you can actually use these to make some more complicated application that is just demonstrating how to use several APIs. And I think I'm going to try to do this rapidly, but let's see if it really works. So the wind attribute is here. I'm going to keep it as a global variable. So now when I refresh the page, I should be able to access the wind as a global variable. And this degrees, well, this tells you the direction that the wind is blowing. So again, it's something I don't really know how it works. So if you go to OpenWeatherMap, there is a lot of data that more or less of information out there, and the only way to find out these things is to research. So I have wind here. I have documentation reading that the wind speed is by default in meters per second. So otherwise, I would not know what 8.2 means. I needed to know that information, and the only way I could find out is by reading the documentation here. And wind direction is in degrees meteorological. So now I'm gonna go and research the internet. What does wind degrees and meteorological means? I go to Wikipedia page, and wind direction, from which it originates. A wind blowing from the north has a wind direction of 0 degrees. So 0 degrees means from the north. Now if you would consider how you would draw these kind of trigonometric circles usually, well, they are usually drawn like that. 0 degrees can mean this angle usually. So now everything is offset by 90 degrees. I need to know this information from somewhere, and the only way I'm learning it is by reading the the API. So more or less when you are using data, make sure you don't make these assumptions everywhere. I'm actually going to leave the application as it is now, I think. Or let's try very quickly to do this modification. So if wind is not null, because the wind can actually be null until my request finishes to the API. So before I know what the wind is going to be, I'm just going to assume it's null. But then okay, I'm going to have two variables here, and depending on the angle, so the degree attribute here multiplied by the speed. Oh no, my computer is acting up again. Sorry, sometimes I don't know what happens, it goes into some tablet mode or whatever. And the only way to make it work again is typing in the stuff. That logging in again. So okay, I have the speed as a radius vector of that the wind is going to blow the element, and on the x I'm going to put here a cosine. I'm going to need to compensate for the 90 degrees, and I'm also going to need a function to convert to radians, because these degree values are not in radians, and the sine function from JavaScript expects radians. So even though this app is very simple looking, there are many ways that you can make mistakes here. So yeah, so turning it to radians, it's more or less multiplied by pi divided by 180, right? I think so, if I'm not mistaken. So now I save the file, refresh the page, I don't really know if it's working or not, but but the code is doing something. So maybe I can put here also a multiplier value of 10 to this speed it's moving, and I would get some kind of more significant movement there. Okay, I have a feeling this is not, oh, it's not used anywhere, sorry. It should be added here to the LNG, so LNG is going to be the X component and LAT is going to be the Y component. When this happens, it's very hard to explain what the result is. I think this multiplier actually has to be a downscaler, because the speed, I don't want it to move 9 degrees the speed of the wind all the time. Okay, so now 100, the wind was 140 degrees, so that means it should speed up but also move downwards a little bit. I think the effect is just still too strong, so I'm gonna put another 0 there. And this app is going to work differently all the time, depending on how the wind in Joensuu is going to be on that specific day. So if the wind is going to blow to the north, he's going to move to the north. If the wind is going to go to the west, eventually he will stop and start to move backwards, but you would have to wait for a very, very long time for that to happen. But anyway, so sorry it took longer than expected, but I will have 10 minutes less tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow we will end quicker. But anyway, so check it out and keep in mind the small things like think about custom icons. If you don't know how to draw as fantastic as me, then just find icons somewhere, because there are many free sources. Just don't use defaults anywhere, and because they will not be enough. And yeah, any questions from today or?
It's not in the bag. That's weird.
No questions?
You never know.
Okay, good. So see you tomorrow.